Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for tuning in to season 2 of Hey Man, It's Okay. I'm your host, Sky. Ryan's not with me this morning, but I'm here to do a brief introduction before we just jump into this episode. In this episode, we are talking about maybe something a little bit controversial. We're jumping right into talking about Jonah Hill and the dealings going on with him and his ex, Sarah Brady, who released some text messages from the end of their relationship. But I wanted to jump on and do a brief introduction. We're jumping right into this topic because it's so timely right now, but we're going to get into introductions of Ryan and myself in future episodes because we felt it was important to talk about some of the things going on right now in the world. But I promise in future episodes, you'll meet Ryan, he'll introduce himself, he'll tell his story, tell you why exactly he's here at Hey Man, It's Okay. So we're so excited to have him as our brand new co-host. We're so excited to start the new season. So I hope you all enjoy, and thanks for tuning in. I've come to bring you life. Last chance to put up a fight. So rise again. The end begins, and we will wage the war within.
Hello. Welcome, everybody, to Hey Man, It's Okay. My name is Ryan Heapy, and I'm a licensed marriage family therapist out of Newport Beach, California. And this is my amazing co-host.
I am Sky. I am not a therapist, and I live in Seattle, Washington.
And today, I think we have a pretty fun episode for you guys. I think it might get a little controversial, even as this has definitely been a controversial topic. I have seen it all over social media. I feel like if you have been on social media in the past 3 or 4 days, you can't miss this one. And that being the Jonah Hill / Sarah Brady text messages, misogynistic narcissist claims, all sorts of controlling, all sorts of different things that we can get into. And I know some of the things I want to talk about is like therapy talk of it all, the throwing around these diagnoses and terms, and also everybody else's different opinions, I think, that are out there. And maybe just to kind of catch you guys up, and, you know, if you haven't kind of followed along this story over the last few days, Jonah Hill, who I believe initially from Superbad fame to most recently, he came out with a documentary about him and his therapist, which I might have some points to talk about there as well about the, if we're going to talk about boundaries, there were some interesting boundaries in that documentary as well. And so Jonah Hill was in a relationship with this professional surfer / model, I believe in 2021 for about a year. They broke up. I was actually reading some of his breakup messages a little bit ago. And so they broke up, I think, about a year and a half ago, maybe even 2 years ago. And
yeah, it sounded like it was like 2021-ish.
And since then, Jonah has been with somebody else that was actually part of the breakup texts that were between him and Sarah, the surfer. And he's been with somebody else and has just recently ushered in a new baby. And right after the birth of this baby, his ex-girlfriend, Sarah, decided to unleash a slew of text messages while she claims she isn't trying to throw him under the bus or slander him. There was a lot of slanderous context, I think, around them, and definitely sort of in a lot of the captions next to the release of some of these text messages. I don't know if there's anything I'm missing there, Sky, as far as the background of the story.
No, I think you pretty much covered the gist of what happened. I think it's kind of weird boiling it down to a simple summary, but I think as we go into it, I think it'll become clear to people, kind of what people see from each side, really. I'm hoping, maybe we have differing opinions. We don't know. We haven't talked about this yet. But I want to defer to you, really, because, being the licensed therapist and seeing these conversations, there's so much that I've seen that has been put onto him and his therapist and through his therapy journey that some people are saying he is misusing terms and misusing things like boundaries. So I'm really curious what your thoughts are,
So
really,
actually,
first of all.
before I even go into this, let me say that these are my personal opinions here. This is not me acting as a licensed therapist for anybody, nor necessarily giving advice in a professional context. I think another big part of the story is that we don't know the whole story, right? Like, I don't think we've even heard from Jonah Hill since this. And so who knows kind of the full context of the relationship? We're only getting one side. And even then, I don't know how cherry picked some of these text messages are. So all that being said, we're coming from a place of just only being able to know kind of what we know here. So back to your question there, Sky. Boundaries. Probably the most prominent text message that I've seen out there was the one where he lays out his kind of, here are my boundaries that I will accept of you, which is an interesting way to kind of position boundaries. I think there can be a case made that these are boundaries. And it was a long list. I think some of them included like provocative photos, modeling photos, bikini photos,
showing yourself out in bikinis and thongs, hanging out with unstable people, hanging out with single males. I can't do that.
Surfing with men really was on there. Yeah.
She's a professional surfer. Come on, Jonah. But yeah, it's just like there was some things that I was like, that's okay. I understand a little bit where he's coming from on that, but I'd like you to continue before I go into my opinion.
So maybe sticking to the boundary. Well, first, right, I think a lot of this might be, they're definitely his insecurities. Okay. Some may be justified, some just plain insecure. And why are you getting into a relationship if there's already all of these issues that you have? Why then enter into a relationship where you are basically trying to kind of change someone? And so here is kind of where I understand why this can definitely come off as controlling. Like, you are entering into a relationship with somebody where you already know what they do. Okay. And now you are telling them that if you want to maintain in this relationship, or if I'm going to stay in this relationship, you can no longer continue doing these activities or posting these pictures. The definition that I have for love, that I think that we all want from a partner is somebody that accepts us completely for who we are and doesn't want to change us, wants to support our growth, and if we want to change, they're going to support that as well. But, not somebody who wants to completely change us, and definitely not changing somebody's career, lifestyle. So I kind of have some issues with that. And, I will say it triggered a lot inside me. I was recently in a relationship where I had a lot of my own insecurities come up. I had a lot of old trust issues that were triggered. My partner for the time worked in nightlife and lived in Las Vegas. And while she was herself was totally trustworthy, she was a wonderful person, it was difficult for me to contend with the idea that, one, there's this person, 200 miles away that I'm, thinking about constantly. And who knows, the amount of guys that are going to be approaching her bar and flirting with her. Okay. But I can't ask her to leave that job. I can't ask her to not talk to any of the male customers, to proactively maybe get rid of any sort of thing that could possibly trigger me, and therefore to anticipate all of those things, or even imagine kind of laying out a list of things that I find acceptable or unacceptable. And I guess this is in regards to just knowing ahead of time, like, this is the situation that I'm getting myself into. Would I do that again? Maybe not. But I don't know. What are your thoughts kind of along some of that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's funny. He knew what she was about. He knew she was a surfer. And when you surf, when you go in the water, sometimes you're going to be in a bathing suit or a bikini. It'd be like, hey, Ryan, I know you're a therapist and, we started doing this podcast together, but I don't want you to be a therapist anymore. And I definitely don't want you talking to females. Yeah. Like, it just seems ridiculous when I say it. So, I mean, he knew what she was about. The thing that I kind of look at here is he told her, my boundary is that you don't do this, 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 and this. But, through my research and stuff, and I have to agree with it, that boundaries are for me. I think I understand where he's coming from. He could have probably approached it with a little more tact. He could have been like, these are the things that I see you doing in your life that I don't want in my life. And so this relationship has to end because our values just don't align. And that would have been that. But because of the way he said it and because he approached it as, these are my boundaries and this is what you can't do, that is where I think the issues lie. Because, yeah, I mean, like you said, it's his own insecurities. How can she control his insecurities? She can't, right? Like, we have to learn to control our own insecurities and love ourselves and care for ourselves the way we need before we know how everyone else can treat us. And going into that and knowing what she was and who she was and what she was about, and then trying to change it, I think is where my biggest issue lies. And like I said, I do see where he was coming from in some aspects, but not in all aspects.
I think we can see the gist of what we might find acceptable and unacceptable in a relationship, but I think like that's something that we should be working on probably before we get into a relationship, or something to actively think about when, we initially start dating somebody. Is this something I'm going to be okay with? Is this line of work? Is this personality type? Is this social media behavior something I'm going to be okay with? And, I think it's understandable if you're not okay with close to nude picture, lots of close to nude pictures on the internet, maybe to somebody having an OnlyFans account. I mean, we can go on and on and on. Right. And for women, maybe I know women who wouldn't want to date a fireman, who wouldn't want to date a police officer, or isn't okay with somebody who uses drugs and alcohol. And so there's all sorts of different, there's a massive spectrum maybe of what we might find, and then, maybe even thinking about different religious preferences or things that are acceptable. If you're Muslim, there are probably a lot of things that, you might find, more unacceptable, and for any religion really. But, so to circle back kind of a bit, I did see a text that he wrote where he was really dragging and like talking bad about sort of the modeling industry. And, and it sounded, was just reading the text, I'm assuming it was sarcastic from him, but he was saying something about how, it lacked depth and, real sustainable relationships, I think were his words. And I had instantly what came up for me was, I wonder like how hypocritical that is coming from somebody who, is this A-lister in the acting world, and wonder, isn't that very much the pot calling the kettle black, I thought, in some ways. So,
yeah. And then one of the other issues I had, not on Jonah's side, but on Sarah's side, was the fact that she even released the messages in the first place. Like, you were in a relationship with this person and you cared about this person. Like, why, after all this time, are you putting out these messages? And, honestly, I think it's just for attention, because now everybody knows her name, but where before maybe they didn't. And maybe she just saw this as like a press opportunity or something.
I really have the biggest problem with overall. This really irks me. I see this often. People airing their private messages, really trying to throw others under the bus. A lot of times I see it from people who, often remove maybe who who it's from, and have to throw in their, this asshole or something. But I don't think any of it looks good. And then just like you're saying, what is the real reason behind it? And I don't want to knock Sarah too much here, but this was all done, at least from what I've read, under the guise that it was for her healing. And because, let me see if I can get this right, her name was going to be forever tied, I believe these are her words, forever tied to Jonah Hill's, and forever here. And therefore, she no longer wanted to tell people that he was like a polite, good man, and that was really what was eating at her inside. And so she needed to share this story. And she also said that she intentionally waited until after the birth of his child, which I was just looking at her Instagram account right before we logged on. And the first thing I noticed was there must be 30 stories, okay, that are on and on and on and on and on and on. Maybe make of it what you will. Somebody who has to post 30 stories, and almost all of them are some form of another of validation for what is going on. And, for her releasing these and also, in my opinion, slandering him. And I think the slandering comes in where she's claiming that it's emotionally abusive. I mean, maybe, but again, I don't feel like that's for the public. I've seen her say, and quite a few people say it's, highly misogynistic and narcissistic. And, I had to write down the definition of misogynistic here. A misogynist is a person who dislikes, who dislikes. I'm curious now. And I think it's important that we stick to definitions, because my other problem with all of this, and we were talking about it, is the therapy talk and all of these terms and diagnoses being thrown out there. Everybody is now an armchair therapist. I saw a mentor of mine posted a sarcastic post earlier today commenting on somebody else's post that said procrastination is a trauma response, and he's pointing to it like, we've done it. Everything is now a trauma response. Motivation is a trauma response. Watching TV is a trauma response. And the word trauma is being thrown around so dang often. And so is narcissist. I mean, everybody is now saying, oh yes, my ex was a narcissist. Your ex might have been selfish, but he probably wasn't a real narcissist. And I'll give you the definition of a narcissist in a second too. Again, so I think it's important that we use the right definitions here. So misogyny, a person who dislikes, despises, or is prejudiced against women. I don't know. Do you think you saw him? You can say he talked crap on the modeling world and said it didn't have depth. I don't know that had any gender connotation to it. You could say it doesn't have depth on the male side either. I think his boundaries were much more about his own insecurities than they were anything to necessarily do with women or gender in general. I think at least I had a hard time finding the slant directly against women here.
I mean, I can say I didn't see anything like against women. It looks like, I think he's just really, really bad at tactfulness, because I think I understand what he's saying, where he doesn't want his, significant other to, go out and show her body. But like, to say you can't show your body, in a bathing suit when she's a professional surfer, I think it's ridiculous. And yes, I think he has some ridiculous demands, but I can understand in his brain what he was trying to get across, because he wants her to be for him. But she's somebody who is in the limelight. She's someone who's going to be seen and photographed, whether she likes it or not. So maybe part of her story is that she feels like she needs to share those things so she can get ahead of other people trying to post these things about her, because it's all about the control of the story. The other thing that I think about that is that, I think it's that she's trying to put words into his mouth, and we haven't heard a thing from Jonah Hill. All we have is the one-sided text messages. And I bet, good for him. He hasn't spoken out yet. Good for him. That's great. Way to go, not jumping into the media.
I'd have to agree.
And just trying to fix this issue with this person, because that's what should have been done in the first place. A relationship is between two people. It should be solved between two people.
I'm shown a lot of these text messages from clients. And, I think we all do this, right? Like, can you believe what he or she said? And so we tell our therapist, right? And we want our therapist, quote unquote, unbiased opinion, because it's not really going to be unbiased, because we're only getting it from one side. Okay. Even if we see the receipts, okay, we're still getting the full context only from one person. And we're biased. That's our client, right? And we kind of want to, go to your family, go to your best friends. In general, try to seek real objective opinion. Try to, if you are somebody who's really not sure, whether you're in a controlling relationship or just whether you're unsure about the relationship in general and you want outside counsel, paint a very unbiased picture. Don't try to just get your side validated. And I think that's, what a lot of this is, kind of this feeling of winning sort of at the end. And I think a lot of people go to social media for that, quick hit of validation. I mean, if you look at her stories, there is one right after another of other influencers sort of talking in the way that we are here, but, completely behind her, you go girl. At the same time, I'm sure there's people who might be getting some benefit out of it. I guess there are other people. There's probably people who are in very emotionally abusive relationships and might have or physically abusive relationships and might be somewhat accepting to that or just stuck in a bad place. And maybe some of these texts, which aren't maybe as awful as some of the things that they're going through. And maybe that shows them that like, oh, wow, like if this is controlling and manipulative, then the situation I'm in, is really controlling and manipulative. And so maybe there is some benefit to all this. Maybe it is giving, some people a way to reevaluate the relationships that they're in.
Yeah, I can see that. And, maybe it is. And maybe there'll be a big, move forward on people's relationships. But I think that to go about it this way was not the right way to do it.
So going back to, what's funny was I didn't see the claims that I kept seeing was misogynistic, controlling, misogynistic, and narcissistic. Controlling, totally agree in some ways, right?
Yeah.
Misogynistic, I had a hard time there. Narcissistic.
Yeah.
What was interesting with narcissistic, and I pulled out the DSM-5 here, which is the Diagnostic Statistics Manual, which has, is the definition of all these diagnoses. And so because I feel like this narcissistic personality disorder is being thrown out there all the time, I had to go to the Bible here. And while I was reading it, it was funny because it does kind of describe maybe somebody who is in his position as a world famous actor who is on TV. So I'll just go through it for our education here. But the beginning is narcissistic personality disorder, a pervasive pattern of grandiosity, a need for admiration, and a lack of empathy, beginning by early adulthood and present in a variety of contexts as indicated by 5 or more of the following. And so you need 5 of these, okay? And with every diagnosis, it's pretty easy to make cases where we could fit into them, where we can, pinpoint one behavior where we might have been narcissistic or some thought. But we really want to think overall, in the kind of the overarching context here. So I'll just kind of like briefly kind of go through these. Has a grandiose sense of self-importance. That's the first one. 2, is preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. Believes that he or she is special and unique and can only be understood by or should associate with other special or high status people. 4, requires excessive admiration. 5, has a sense of entitlement. 6, is interpersonally exploitative. Now, you might be able to make a case for that one on the releasing of these text messages. So 7, lacks empathy, is unwilling to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of others. 8, is often envious of others or believes that others are envious of him or her. And 9, shows arrogant, haughty behaviors or attitudes. In those text messages, I don't feel like there was narcissistic behavior on display.
I don't think so either. Not after listening to that definition, especially. It looks like he's not trying to be like it's his way or no way. He's just saying, I can't do this. And he's a movie star. Of course, he's going to have a little bit of, haughtiness to him. But he also seems like a really, like, he's just a regular dude.
Yeah,
and like he doesn't want to be bothered, just like everybody else.
One of the key features, of narcissism is the lack of empathy. And while I think in some of the text messages that I read where they were breaking up or he was breaking up with her, I did think there was some empathy there. Maybe he could have verbalized or, articulated some of these things a little better. It definitely seemed like he cared.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree with that.
And I think the real sort of manipulative or controlling, I don't want to diagnose anybody here, but possible narcissism, is the unleashing of those text messages, right? And there was one that says like requires excessive admiration. I feel like a lot of that there is interpersonally exploitative, right? Takes advantage of others to achieve his or her own needs. I don't know.
Like putting out a text message under the guise of it's your healing and that's what you needed for you. Yeah, I think you're right. That makes a lot of sense. I never thought about that being on her side before, but of course I'm not a professional who knows the well, now I do know the definition. But as far as, like diagnosing it, yeah, I can understand why there's definitely narcissistic tendencies there. Whether or not that person, whether Sarah's narcissistic or not is really up for debate. I have this little bit of a picture of, who she is.
And we're not, I mean,
and who he is. And
you're
really,
right. We don't, we've got a speck of sand in their, in their whole context of life.
Yeah. To me, I mean, I just think, it was a bad relationship from the start. I don't think that they were destined to be together or anything by any means.
Did you see their matching outfits on the red carpet? No.
No.
I find that to be the most...
I mean, and here's the thing, like...
the most troubling behavior of all.
There's a couple... Look at MGK and Megan Fox. Like, you thought they were going to have such a tight relationship. They wore matching outfits everywhere. And now they're not even together anymore. So, but I don't see them talking bad about each other. So there's a huge difference between a healthy relationship and a non-healthy relationship. And I think the importance there is how you communicate with that person. And what's happening here with the Jonah Hill situation just sounds like complete unhealthy communication. Anybody can dress up. I could dress up in a white polo and match you, even though we're not going on the red carpet. Doesn't mean you and I would be a good relationship.
Right. Yep. It was an interesting outfit. I think it was like a big pantsuit or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's just people see all we saw was the surface of that relationship. We didn't see the deep interworkings, and now we're just getting a peek into one side of it, but it's only like this much of the relationship. And it was just really towards the end of that relationship. And the end of relationship is never fun and never is easy. That's why it's the end of the relationship.
Yeah. You're right. Like, it's really, you often have one person letting another person go and often the other person is, probably blindsided or doesn't want the relationship to end and has never, is in such intense emotional, state that, whether that's anger, frustration, disappointment, sadness, grief, confusion. Ending a relationship gracefully on both people's ends takes some real work and real empathy. And really, it's a rarity really for sure. Caring about the other person and really caring about yourself, and then not wanting to burn any bridges and say things that you wish you took back. And, in regards to all this, I'm sure all of us, especially, if text messaging was around, when I was 16 or 17 and, somebody broke my heart, I'm sure I would not want those text messages aired, at any time. Like, when we're...
Oh, man, thank God text messaging didn't come out really till I was an adult. Because there's some things, like, I'm so glad that there's no record of messages, things that were said. Remember the little paper notes you used to fold up and hand to your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever? Like that, that'd be so much easier, and they don't have them anymore.
I actually found one of those from a pre-text period of my life, and just recently, I have to bring this up, and my partner at the time, I think I was like 25. I think it was pre-text. I'm pretty sure. At least texts were not as, just an everyday part of our life. And she had sort of cheated. She made a mistake. And anyways, it was the most beautiful, articulate, thoughtful letter. And, it was about 2 pages long. And I guess I just bring this up, like, I wish we all kind of still put that time, or even had maybe that space to take the time, like, okay, I'm not going to be able to communicate with him or her immediately right now after this breakup. And so I'm going to have a few days to write this, well thought out letter. And I don't know. It was so sweet. And it was like so from the heart. And, I thought back and I was like, oh, she really was she was a great person. And that was really cool. It was cool to read almost 20 years later now. Yeah. So.
Yeah. That I don't have any notes. I think anytime I broke up with a girl, any paper notes we had between each other would always get like folded up and put into a coffee can and then burned just because, that was what, this emotional young boy did I'm going to burn everything I ever got from them. So I don't have any of those, unfortunately.
And maybe that's a more cathartic way to go about. And, healing from a relationship is sort of burning some of these things. And whether that's deleting the whole text thread, deleting the photos instead of sitting on them for a year or two and then releasing them to the public. So
thankfully, there's none of that. I'm so glad that, I'm still with the last, I remember back in the day when I had this one girlfriend and I had to pay for unlimited text messaging because I sent her, it was like in a month, I had like 800 texts, and my parents were not happy about that. And so most things were in paper. But sorry, I'm getting away from the topic here. It just made me think, unfortunately, Jonah Hill made the mistake of putting something in electronic form, and then it's forever.
That's another lesson. Yeah.
Screenshots are forever. Internet's forever, a lot of unfortunately.
One, work on your insecurities before you get into a relationship. Maybe take your time getting to know the person, truly kind of figuring out who they are. One thing I always like to say is really believe people when they tell you who they are. Don't try to change people. One, like, it's so hard for us to change when we want to change, to think you're going to change this person or that they're going to, mold themselves into the person that you want them to be is, just a fantasy and a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. And that's the thing that you were talking about that really caught my attention, actually, that I want to circle back to, is the fact that he's trying to change her. Like, that part is something that just blows my mind. Like, I've known that you're what you are and who you are and what you are about. She never misrepresented herself obviously from this little small piece that I see, she never misrepresented herself. She never said that she wants something else in life. And it's not like they were in a long-term relationship and all of a sudden she's like, okay, I'm going to go be a surfer and a model. And she was already these things. And if you have to change somebody that much, I mean, obviously, if you two were growing together and the relationship is building, you're going to change, but it's going to be for yourself, and you're going to do it yourself because of your love for your partner, not you're going to force this person to change, because that'll never happen. When in the world of forcing someone to change has that worked?
Good luck. Good luck. Yeah. I mean, just probably ask any parent who's wanted, to control their child, right? The more control you try to exert.
Yeah. Isn't the term, I'll tell you till I'm blue in the face. Yeah, the more control you try to exert,
you are more likely going to get the opposite behavior that you're hoping for. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to try stopping me from seeing somebody, I'm just going to go see them anyway. And it's going to be worse because now you're not monitoring it. Yeah. Right? So, I mean, it's the same concept. Like, forcing someone to change is not the healthy way to go about it. And I think that they both need to figure themselves out again or more before they try to get into another relationship. Obviously that's what dating is for, is figuring out who you are, but I guarantee he's going to be more careful next time in his next relationship.
I mean, he's in one. He's got a bit.
He's got a kid now, right?
I don't know. I'm judging only off of everything that I've seen on TV and him acting, and in a documentary where there's probably some acting and, there's a portrayal that we put out there, but, he does seem maybe like somebody who would take this, hopefully, and use it as a teaching lesson. I mean, what would be really interesting is to be a fly on the wall of the relationship that he's in now and how that sort of unfolded between him and his partner. Whether that's been
I'm wondering,
like, love, I don't know, has it been a loving, supportive experience? I got your back, both ways, or, is this opening up, a can of worms?
Yeah. I'm wondering if they're ever going to release a statement about it, because, you know how celebrities do, like, oh, Jonah Hill's people released a statement about blah, blah, blah. Here's what they said. Do you think that we're going to see anything like that? Or do you think it's just he's just not going to say anything and just let it die?
So far,
of course nothing. She doesn't, because she knows what he's going to say.
I mean, this has been out for three days, I think. And so far, no I don't know. I mean, if I was him, I would probably not say anything.
Same. I wouldn't either, because people are just going to say, oh, well, you're just saying what you have to say, and it doesn't matter what you say. I mean, people are going to say it doesn't matter what he says anyway, but the real people in your life are the ones that are going to know the truth.
And
I think that's what's most important here. I think if too many people are involved.
Usually when these responses come out, a lot of times hearing some of the responses from some of the people who were accused and committed, probably awful behavior during the whole Me Too, and a lot of them came off far worse after the response, I feel like, than but which also a lot of times
I mean, I'm not going to stop.
You're not going to stop watching Jonah Hill?
I was just going to say, I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to stop watching Jonah Hill. I like him. I think he's great. I laugh at his movies. I think he's a good dude. He's just in a movie with Eddie Murphy. It was great. But, who you are in your personal life is not why I watch you. I watch you for your acting skills. while it's not my place to judge these people for what they do in their personal life. That's not
Did you
my job.
see his Stutz documentary? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I actually haven't yet. Yeah, I've seen previews for it. I just haven't
I'd love to
watched it
see
yet.
what you think. I watched it. It took me a little while. It's a little slow. Even, being a therapist, I was really excited that this was, oh, wow, he's putting a therapist on display. It was a really cool kind of profile, maybe, of his therapist. And I was really excited. They kind of went through telling both Jonah's story, the therapist, both of their personal stories, kind of their relational story, which I thought might have pushed some ethical conflict of interest boundaries between client and therapist. And also they weaved in sort of some skills at the same time, like coping mechanisms and his therapist actually does a really cool thing where he has these flashcards that he kind of writes down little skills or concept and hands them to clients at the end of session, which I thought was like a really cool touch and maybe something I'd even want to incorporate into my practice at some point. As a matter of fact, I had a client ask for a list of some of the things that we talked about yesterday. And, I wish I had a little flashcard to kind of write down, like, here's your prescription, and this week it's radical acceptance. So,
yeah.
So I do think it's cool.
But do you feel like the documentary has an accurate representation of the relationship? I mean, do you see where things could have been?
It seemed very authentic. I think the therapist seemed very authentic. I think Jonah was trying to portray some sort of image there, that he was doing the work. And, you know what? Hey, good for him for putting out a documentary on therapy. The more, and I thought it did.
Yeah. I mean, you can't knock the guy for that.
I think it did further normalize like men going to therapy. I don't think a lot of men probably ended up watching it, but if you did, I think it was encouraging. It showed a cool relationship and somebody who was getting some, had such positive impact that he made a whole movie about it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I had the opportunity to record my therapy sessions, I would, but I definitely wouldn't put it out to the world.
That's for sure. You want to talk about one of the hardest?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about therapy until like I'm blue in the face, but I would never share that out in the world.
So when going through grad school, in your first, 100 sessions, you have to record a few of them and then watch them with your cohort, with your class, basically. That is one of the most excruciatingly painful experiences I have ever been through. And I think every other grad student probably agrees. Watching yourself stumble through questions, not, just watching yourself talk. It's hard for me to watch these things back, to be honest. So yeah, watching my very first sessions on film was difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's also interesting, and there's so many different angles that it can be hit from. It's hard to like really narrow down. I mean, honestly, I can't see who's at fault and who's not at fault. It kind of just seems like it's a crapshoot all the way around.
You're talking about Jonah and Sarah, the whole, yeah. Two people probably shouldn't have been together.
Like I said, there's a reason that relationship's over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, and I'll be the first to admit.
He admitted that. I think he said something like,
I'll be the first to admit I've entered in some relationships that we both knew we probably shouldn't have gone in. It's hard to learn these things. It's hard to learn what you're comfortable with, not comfortable with, what kind of person you want. I think the Gottmans, who are the sort of king and queen of couples therapy, they're saying is basically like you're choosing a set of problems when you're choosing a partner. So it's just what kind of problems are you willing to deal with?
That is accurate, but it's whether you choose to help with those problems or not, or just let them sit there. And that's where I think the big difference lies in a healthy and unhealthy relationship is you're willing to help your partner fix their problems.
I think you have a point there. Instead of pointing them out, exploiting them, exacerbating them, actually wanting to work with your partner to help, with their problems is the sign of a good relationship and some emotional maturity.
But both people have to be willing to put in the work. It can't be one-sided. That's my take on all that. It doesn't, there's not really a right answer.
Yeah.
And I'm not asking anybody to pick a side either. I'm not asking you to pick a side. I'd actually be really curious to hear from our listeners and our followers. what are your thoughts on it, on the Jonah Hill issue? Is there something that we missed or something that, maybe we should look into more? Because we just have a small glimpse of things. We don't have, a full scope of stuff. And it makes it tough to really render from a man's perspective, what happened.
Yeah. I've heard, this has been fun talking to this podcast has been fun, but also talking to a lot of my friends, picking their brains. Like, what do you think about this? And everybody has sort of had different takes, but everybody has sort of also had a personal experience in one that somewhat relates to this as well. That's been interesting. And I think that's why this story is so captivating, is we all want a relationship for the most part, and we've all struggled in them probably at some point too. And so it's all probably very relatable at some level.
Yeah, and I hope they both grow and change and learn from this experience instead of letting it take them down. And it seems like, if we haven't heard from Jonah Hill, is he taking this in stride? Is he gonna be like, this is a past relationship. There's really no need for me to say anything about this.
Hopefully he's just enjoying the new birth of his baby. Yeah, I'm sure this was not what he was looking forward to.
That's a great event. No, shame on her for putting this on him when he's supposed to be having the best time of his life with his new kid.
Yeah,
that's my main thing is this could have all been avoided if she wouldn't have put this up on the internet. That's the lesson here, kids. Don't put anything on the internet.
Except in our comment section. So let us know.
Yes. Yeah. How about don't put anything in electronic form that you don't want to be saved forever? Yeah, you feeling like we got everything you want to talk about with it out, and
I think kind of
covered the bases.
I think we hit all the points. We hit all the angles. We found some pros and cons to just about everything, I think. I even feel, as
cool. Well, thanks for. Yeah.
I'm sure was a pro to some people out there who needed to see some of those texts and maybe to reevaluate their relationship. So perspective is just about everything. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, that's not something I ever really thought about before this moment when you're talking about, maybe other people can learn a lesson and evaluate their relationships.
And maybe guys too. A few of the profiles that I follow on Instagram, I know were very I see nothing wrong with this at all. This is just asking for respect. And, those were some of the top comments. I don't know. I also think that there's a teachable moment for men too here, whether that's be a little bit more self-aware when you're getting into a relationship, maybe work on your insecurities and trust issues if you can. And also, maybe recognize when you're trying to change your partner and, maybe coming across controlling, maybe that's something to reevaluate. So
someone once said to me that, we always, when you're growing up, you say, oh, I'm looking for my other half. But you need to be whole in order to help someone else who should also be whole before you should be in a relationship. Because you shouldn't need that person to complete you. You should need that person to complement you.
Amen.
But yeah, that's my last knowledge, my last piece of advice before we sign off.
Your last piece of wisdom to drop, your mic drop moment there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, thank you guys for listening. Again, this was fun wading into some controversial topics here. Please subscribe, leave us a review, comment, let us know how you feel.
Follow us on all social media sites, Facebook, Instagram,
the new one,
Threads now, and TikTok, all at Hey Man, It's Okay. And okay is just the letters O and K. But yeah, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it. Ryan, thanks for having this conversation with me today. You really opened my eyes on some of the issues revolving this that I'm going to go talk to my small circle about, because we've been talking about it since last night also. Cool. But until next time, everybody, it's okay to not be okay. And thanks for joining.